California's congressional delegation is split over an item coming to the floor of the House of Representatives September 17th, the president's decision to enter a nuclear deal with Iran. The topic of that deal, highly controversial. Congressman Brad Sherman represents parts of the San Fernando Valley and Sherman Oaks, a Democrat who has been a long supporter of the president's. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
But on this issue, you are opposed to his nuclear deal with Iran. Why?
I'm not so much opposed to the deal. I just don't think that that it's a good foreign policy maneuver for Congress to endorse the deal.
Why?
The deal's the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's good and bad in the first year. It gets ugly next decade. And it's critical that this not look like a binding treaty. Legally, it's not, but from an appearance standpoint, it has to be clear to the American people that we can force a renegotiation of this deal before it gets ugly next decade.
What's ugly about it?
What's ugly is that in years 12 through 15, and certainly thereafter, Iran can have an unlimited number of centrifuges of unlimited quality. So President Obama will sleep well in the first year of the deal because they'll be limited to 6,000 IR-1s, but some future president will have to go to sleep knowing that they have 100,000 IR-8s.
IR-8s, we're getting into the weeds here,
yes.
But essentially it is, in your view, a pathway to a nuclear bomb.
It's a pathway to a nuclear bomb next decade, not so much this decade.
Some would say, and we had a former colleague of yours, Mel Levine, on recently, saying, listen, there is no better deal. This is it.
Certainly the president doesn't think he can get a better deal.
But you think he can?
No, I think that we leave things the way we promised them in Vienna. We promised Iran that the president would sign, and we told Iran that Congress wouldn't sign. That's what we promised. We shouldn't deliver any more than that, and we should leave ourselves free to seek an extension of this deal next decade.
Sanctions. Those are off the table now. They're going to get how many billions of dollars?
They will get $56 billion, according to the Secretary of Treasury. Some would argue more. They will use that to some degree to help their own people, but there'll be a lot of graft and corruption, and they will kill a lot of Sunni Muslims.
Practically speaking, what options are there?
The option that I think we're going to get to, and not by design necessarily, is that there'll be a presidential signature on this agreement. The president will follow it faithfully for the first year and a half. Most of what needs to be verified in the first year and a half is verifiable. And at some subsequent time, we will put all options on the table to say if we're going to extend sanctions relief, we have to extend the nuclear controls.
But what good is that if you have returned to the Iranian government $100 billion?
I'm going to be proposing new and different sanctions to try to force Iran to rein in.
Like what?
We could have sanctions on loans to the Iranian government. Those don't exist now. We could have sanctions against their manufacturing sector. Those don't exist now. So we could have new sanctions designed to change their non-nuclear behavior, and it's very clear under this agreement that we're allowed and expected to try to change their behavior, not only with regard to holding our hostages, the 4 Americans who are there, with regard to terrorism and support for the Assad regime. We have to take action. We can't ignore that just because they've slowed down their nuclear program.
What pushback have you gotten from the White House?
They spent an awful lot of time talking to me. I've never had so many classified briefings one-on-one. I've never spent so much time with the president one-on-one. They're disappointed, but when they made their lists of who was likely to vote with them on this, I was not on that list. So I faced some pressure from my colleagues, my leadership, but ultimately I think the right action for Congress is to make it clear to the world that this is an executive agreement. It is not a treaty, and certainly not a ratified treaty. And
you had an exchange with Secretary of State John Kerry in committee. That got a little testy. You asked him, essentially, if Congress decides not to side with the president, will you follow the law as established by the United States Congress and the legislative branch?
If we were able to override a presidential veto, that act would trigger certain sanctions. And the question is, would the administration follow the law if that was the law? And the answer from the Secretary of State was he didn't know whether they would follow the law or not. And as a lawmaker, that makes me a little upset.
But seriously, this is an administration. This is your administration. You've been behind this administration from the very beginning. Did they see you as a traitor on this score?
The executive branch and whoever heads it has seen me as a bit of a sharp thorn from time to time. The last president, for 8 years, violated the Iran Sanctions Act to benefit the oil companies that did business with Iran, and he did it every day. So it didn't come as a shock to me to see another Secretary of State say that if there were sanctions laws triggered by a congressional action that he disagreed with, there was no assurance that he would follow the law.
United States Congressman Brad Sherman, Democrat of Sherman Oaks, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll touch base on this. The vote is September 17th, around then.
And I hope people will come to my town hall on September 20th.
Very good. Thank you again for coming.